We're here to talk about how to create the best possible climate solution and then some alternatives from there. Best possible solution for your customers and really what you need to know about how to proceed through that. So as you see up on the slide, we're going to go through the best case scenario. And the best case scenario as we go through this is a centralized climate solution. Okay, so you have to know that there are 3 steps as we go through this. I'm oversimplifying a little bit, but there are 3 steps. And as mentioned, there are YouTube videos. Hopefully you've already seen them. If you haven't, go watch them. They're set up for how to use the widget, to tell you about the dashboard and the full screen view and edit mode. There's also a Design Center setup video. And what we're talking about today isn't necessarily how to go through the widget and utilize the widget. It's about the entire soup to nuts aspects of building that experience inside of Equinox and inside of Vantage. So as I mentioned, there's 3 steps. Step 1 is preparing. Step 2 is setting up DC, the Design Center environment properly. And step 3 is then working on the Equinox devices to arrange that in a way that's going to be usable for your customers. Now inside of each step, as you're looking at this slide, hopefully you're with this online, and if you're just listening as you drive, I'll try and describe them as well. But inside of each step, there are a few key things that you're going to want to know. So for example, with the preparation, our step 1, our recommended design is the centralized or centrally placed set of stats in conjunction with remotely located sensors. Now, that means down in the mechanical room, you're placing these stats, and then out in each one of the areas or zones, you're placing the perhaps the flush sensor or the surface mount sensor for those particular areas. And if you're wanting to do some averaging, you can do averaging with up to 4 sensors, or excuse me, with 4 sensors or with 9 sensors in those cases. And that will give you averaging for that particular stat. So between 1 remote temperature sensor, or for averaging with 4 or 9, you have several options. Another thing you should know about using a centralized climate solution is the fact that this thermostat can be used as a temperature control device and or also as a humidity control device. It's an either-or scenario. So they can control the temperature, and then you can add an additional one for controlling humidity if that's part of the project parameters. So add that as necessary. And as you're planning and preparing and designing that system, keep those things in mind. One of the other things to consider as you're preparing and designing this is to remember that perhaps the most important yet most neglected aspect of a successful project with climate is the network. We understand that not everybody is an IT pro, but if you're not one, that's fine. Don't worry about it. There are options. Contract one. Talk to us about some of the networking gear that we recommend, and definitely use quality gear. The network for Equinox, we have found time and time again through tech support and project visits, is absolutely critical to the success of moving forward with that solution. Trust us, you'll be grateful later that you spent the time in getting that arranged beforehand instead of troubleshooting it later. Step number 2, again, you're used to this. You know what's going on. We're going to go through the Design Center setup. Really here we're just talking about working with the objects, adding thermostats, right? Putting them on the wired bus or putting them on the radio bus. You've got to pay attention to the parameters inside of there, whether it's 1 set of contacts or 2, which determine the stages. Also determine and look in the parameters for friendly names. Inside of Design Center, every single thermostat has a programming name or an object name that's used for the integrator and the designer. There is a friendly or a display name that's used for your customers. Make sure you pay attention to those. Also, remember that in DC, as you add these thermostats to different buses, we'll create the kit for you, and it's less expensive to purchase the kit than it is to buy them separately. So make sure you go through that. One other thing to remember is that on the Equinox 4.0, one thing that you'll need to do is if you're going to choose to use the mini widget on the 4.0, you do need to assign its zone. Okay, so as you go through this and you're setting up your project file, just by virtue of the fact of adding the thermostats, it will create the widgets for you in the full Equinox environment. But Equinox 4.0 needs you to make a drop-down selection for which thermostat you want to control. Okay. One other thing I'm going to throw out there for you is, coming with the release of the software in a few weeks, with the Design Center 3.3, we now have live testing of thermostats from within Design Center. So when you have a live connection to the controller and you select the thermostat in the view, you can see current temperature, change modes, and set points. So basically you have a dashboard of what's going on with the thermostats without having to walk around to every single one of the stats to see if they're really configured, are they online, and the like, and are they giving you proper feedback. So utilize Design Center, okay? And that's step 2. Step number 3 is, once you set up Design Center and program the controller, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to see all of the widgets start to populate on either the 7.3s or the 4.1s or your app objects. How you set up Design Center has a direct impact on how Equinox will look and act, right? How that widget will, how it will behave. So make sure you go in, double check the display names, double check that everything is showing up, you're getting the right modes. Then you're going to want to personalize this environment. Here's where Equinox shines, because you can take those thermostats, no matter the order that they came in Design Center, and you can rearrange them. You can show and hide. Remember edit mode, that third level down of Equinox? You can show and hide different thermostats based on profile. Maybe for this space you need to edit out and not show some of these thermostats, or maybe for this particular profile you need to show these 2 thermostats first before the others. So make sure you go in and take a look at that. And don't forget that you have the emulator in Design Center as well, with the live connection, similar to live thermostat testing. You have the emulator in Design Center where you can click on a 7.3 or 4.1 object and see specifically what's going on and manipulate the UI and that profile from that device. And that can be done locally or remotely. Now, the result of this, as you take a look at a centrally located or essentially set up thermostat and climate system, is that it's the best possible experience. It is a fantastic automatic UI, complete with the 3 levels. Keep in mind that now you have no real programming that you have to do. Do you remember in the old days where you had to build hundreds of tasks, perhaps, for thermostat programming? Each thermostat needed an increment and a decrement. Each thermostat needed a go-to mode, heat, cool, auto and off, perhaps fan on and off. And the more thermostats you added, the more rote programming you had. That's all gone through the UI and through Equinox. And between Equinox and the 4.0, you're able to reduce the clutter. You've got a consistent UI, and you can expand to as many zones as you really need in this environment. You got the flexibility of profiles, and your stats and screens are based on, can be based on user, can be based on location, can be based on time of day perhaps, or a function that may be going, maybe party mode. So set up those profiles and personalize the environment for it. So that's our very first and recommended solution for the climate solution, is utilizing the Vantage Stat with sensors in a centrally located location with sensors out on the walls and Equinox interfaces throughout. Let's move to the next one, Reed. So we all know every project is different, and there's special requests or constraints, maybe customer needs. We want you to know that we get that, and we know there are options, so you can adapt and you can do a better job, you can be better than the next guy. Heck, you can do better than your own last job. So the next scenario, in this case, we're still talking about Vantage stats, but we're talking about placing those locally throughout the project. Okay, here we have the same 3 steps, right? Prepare, set up DC, and then edit the Equinox devices. But these thermostats are locally installed in each room, in each zone, instead of in the mechanical room with sensors out and about. Now, this happens sometimes because the customer maybe goes against your recommendation, or perhaps the conditions for retrofit require it to be such. Maybe you can't make changes to the wall and refinishing. So we understand that there's cases where these thermostats are going to need to be out and about throughout the project. You know, there may be cases as well where you have not been able to run bus. So if it's a true wireless retrofit and you're using radio product, this is a great application for that as well. Again, in these same cases, you can add humidity control as necessary. And as you recall, the CC stat can be used for either or purposes. It can be set up in the field that way. There's really no difference past this point between the best scenario and this scenario. You still need and are required to have a fantastic, solid, reliable network. You will save yourself a lot of time. And then planning on a mix of different interfaces. Still go through and set up Design Center like we discussed. And we still, after Design Center set up and programmed, you still have the Equinox devices that need to be set up and the profiles set up. Once installed, though, I think it's key to understand that the experience for the user is going to be identical, whether you choose a centrally located or a locally installed set of thermostats. The Equinox experience is identical. The difference is the amount of wall clutter that there is. Right? You can enhance that experience for your customers. But all the features and benefits are available regardless of the install type and the use of remote temperature sensors. So the key differences here between the best and the good is just the location of the thermostats, and we understand that there are cases where both may happen.